knows there's a major fight coming this year in Olympia as Governor Jay Inslee moves to ban the AR-15 and every other semi-automatic center-fired rifle in the state. Guys, today's radical left is unhinged. Complete tyrants run amok. You're going to want to watch this video. After it's done, hit the link below, get involved in this fight, and help us shut down this tyranny in Washington State. Hey guys, Aaron Dorr here with the American Firearms Association. Every gun owner in America knows right now that we have two major gun control bills on the move when it comes to AR-15s. We have Illinois taking action on this right now, and we're going to see a major fight also in Washington State. I'm joined right now with Representative Jim Walsh from Washington State, who was leading the fight in the Capitol to stop the major attack on our gun rights in Washington. Thanks a lot for your time, Jim. We appreciate you being on the show tonight.
Oh, no worries, Aaron. It's always good to talk about how we can defend people's foundational rights in this country.
So a lot of folks are watching the show here from across the country. Tell our members right now, what exactly is Governor Inslee, the demented tyrant, pushing in this legislation? We know it's going to ban AR-15s. What all is contained in this bill?
What it does is it attempts to shut down the buying and selling of any semi-automatic rifles. Now, they, outside of the language of the statute, they talk about assault weapons, but they've learned at least a little bit that using that kind of scare language, which really has no technical meaning, of course, in the legislation, in the statute, it makes it kind of a clown show. So their language is that it would restrict, really, and prohibit the buying or selling of any semi-automatic rifle. They are arguing in a sort of legalistic stand that this is not a restriction on the right to own a semi-automatic rifle, merely the buying or selling of any going forward. And then they hide behind some consumer protection language in other parts of the law to justify this. It's not justifiable. The restriction or prohibition on buying and selling a semi-automatic rifle is not only an infringement of Washingtonians' rights under the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, it is an impairment of that right as prohibited by Article 1, Section 24 of the Washington State Constitution. So it's unconstitutional. As your viewers know, we tried a ban like this at the federal level 20 odd years ago, didn't do anything positive, didn't decrease crime rates, and ultimately abandoned at the federal level, and as rightly so. So we're just kind of engaging in an exercise in futility here in Olympia, so that the governor can make a few headlines and get on TV at night, kind of yabbering about assault weapon bans and weapons of war and all this hysterical rhetoric that he uses. He's got a little wingman in all of this, our state
Attorney General. Yeah.
And that fellow is by the name of Bob Ferguson, the state attorney general here in Washington, and he's right there with the governor. In fact, he fancies, I think, that this is the way that he becomes the next governor, is to get in that same picture frame with the current governor and talk in hysterical rhetoric about guns.
I know that there's a grandfather clause, like you just said. They're not going to ban the current possession. They're going to ban the future sale or purchase of these firearms. I think there's some, a tiny fraction in the gun rights community that kind of has a bit of an idea that, well, I've already got mine. And so it's kind of a carrot, I think, that Inslee and his colleagues are trying to offer up to that gun rights community. Our position here at AFA has always been that our freedoms were won by our forefathers and our grandfathers, and that today we're fighting not just for our own rights, but it's for our kids and our grandkids, like our previous generations did for us. So we see a grandfather clause as it's a trap, because sure, you might have yours today, but we're fighting for those from the generations yet to come. And specifically, my question to you is, Washington State is well known for this. You guys passed a red flag law several years ago, and you came right back in there. Not you, of course, present company excluded, but your colleagues came right back in just last year and dramatically expanded that law even further. Would you expect a similar action here when it comes to an assault weapons ban if this initial ban becomes successful?
Well, I mean, that's certainly the way they'll go. That's certainly what they'll try. Here we call the red flag an extreme risk protection order, as they do in some states, ERPO. It was the typical foot in the door, initially passed as well. We understand these ERPOs are constitutionally questionable, but we are in such an urgent situation with all this gun violence. We need it right now to the crisis. It will be very narrow. We'll never expand it. And then they immediately tried to expand it.
Exactly. And for those who are not from Washington State, what they did specifically just last year was they expanded their current ERPO laws, where they can now red flag Johnny at school with an ERPO or a red flag law. And then because Johnny is 13 freaking years old, they can then come to your home and say, we need your firearms because your son, who is already not able to own a firearm, has been red flagged. Or Johnny can move out of your home for the time being. So I think we're going to see the exact same thing when it comes to an assault weapons ban. Sure, you can keep the ones you currently own. And then next year, after the next mass shooting, boom, they're going to come right back in there and go to confiscate the guns that we currently own. Is that more or less what the game plan as far as you can determine?
Well, I mean, it's historically been their strategy, and we learn from history what's likely to happen in the future. The key thing to know is that these anti-gun rights radicals truly don't believe in constitutional rights. They don't believe in foundational rights. And that's the really dangerous thing. It goes beyond firearms. They do not believe that there are certain inalienable rights to which we are all entitled as humans, as people. They believe that they, the elected lawmakers, decide what your foundational rights are. And that's just wrong. Our state, although Washington is known as being kind of a progressive state, we're out here on the West Coast and walk arm in arm too often with California and Oregon.
Right.
But our Constitution is actually very good in its description and protection of the right to keep and bear arms. As I mentioned, Article 1, Section 24 of our state Constitution uses the word impair instead of the federal Constitution's infringe, which many legal scholars think is an even broader term of something the government can't do.
Right.
And Article 1, Section 24 also does a better job at making it clear that the right to keep and bear arms in defense of yourself is an individual right. It doesn't allow for any of this legally theorizing that it's a collective right or a militia right or something. No, it's very clearly articulated as an individual right. And then the state constitution here in Washington says that from the exercise of that individual right, you provide a benefit to the state at whole. You defend not only yourself and your property, but you defend the state and the community.
Exactly.
And I think that's exactly right. The reason we don't accept a so-called grandfathering in these impairment infringement bills and statutes is the good that comes from an armed and educated populace is a general public safety and a general security that everyone shares. So it's not just our kids and grandkids we owe it to, it's our neighbors.
Well said. That's very well said. Kind of hand in hand with that, there are some in the gun rights community, and this is a smaller percentage now than we had maybe 10 years ago, but they kind of have bought in some of the lines from the media that nobody needs that scary black rifle, that, they're hunting firearms and that kind of thing. what we've seen in the last couple of years, finally, I think for the entirety of that gun rights community, is the mask has been pulled back now. There's no longer any doubt. Like you just said, these people literally do not believe that we have an individual liberty in this area, the individual right to keep and bear arms. I think if there's anything good in seeing, Governor Newsom in California, Governor Inslee in your state, Governor Hochul in New York act the way they are, it's we've all had to get real with the fact, for those who are trying to pretend it wasn't the case, these people are tyrants. And this is not about education. It's not about trying to convince them that we have a right to keep and bear arms. They know that. They simply don't give a damn. What are your thoughts on that?
It's true. It's very true. In our state, current Governor Inslee is an intensely partisan politician. He is not much of a statesman at all. He spent most of his political career as a member of Congress and was always a very partisan kind of backbench member of Congress. He was elected as governor here in Washington, and you would expect a pivot there. It's understandable that legislators tend to be a little more partisan. They get in the trenches and fight on issues. But when you're elected to an executive position, a statewide,
right,
most people expect you become a little more statesmanlike, a little less partisan. He has not done that. He has remained a partisan, basically an activist at heart. And he's not been a very effective as a governor. In addition to his proposed ban on the sale of any semi-automatic rifle, he's proposed a new permit here in the state of Washington, separate and additional of a concealed pistol license, which we have. Right. It's a permit that Washingtonians will be required to have in order to buy or sell any firearm of any sort, an additional license.
Right.
And he rather foolishly defended this, saying, well, you need a license to drive a car. So I think
classic line from the radical left. Yes.
And it really is said in this kind of shambling, underhanded way. But it really is, you have to explain to the man, well, there is no foundational constitutional right to drive a car. There is one to keep and bear a firearm.
Exactly.
And you say this kind of thing to him, and he just gets glassy-eyed and doesn't understand what you're saying.
Care. Yep.
But this proposed permit to buy or sell any type of firearm, is also just patently, blatantly, clearly unconstitutional. And that New York State case, the Bruin case, of course, has underlined that. If the Heller decision hadn't already done it years ago,
right,
the Bruin one recently clearly says that these state level laws that limit and restrict how an individual can keep and bear a firearm are unconstitutional. And I wish that some of these elected officials would pay more attention to that.
Yeah, I know that our organization's already looking at lawsuits and litigation if this does in fact become law out there. But, and we've had some good wins with Bruin. You mentioned that recently, but a lot of times I think people kind of just sit back and they just kind of plan for that. Our goal right now with our boots on the ground with Washington Gun Rights, our affiliate there in your state, is do all we can to crush this in Olympia if possible. And if not, we'll consider our legal options after the fact. Towards that end, what is the timetable you're expecting right now on this bill as you guys kick off session very shortly?
Yeah, the session starts next week, Monday, January 9th. It is our so-called longer session here in Olympia. Yep. We are a part-time legislature. It goes 105 days, so it goes into April. History suggests that the gun grabbers hold on to these bills. They don't trot them out right away in the session for a vote. It is not currently scheduled for a committee hearing, and that's typical. We'll wait and see what happens. We're prepared for anything. We're prepared for them to bring it out quickly if they do. But sure, generally speaking, the speaker here, who is a progressive, will hold on to some of these bills toward later in the session. There is some good news for people here in Washington. Our state capitol had largely been shut down the last couple of years because of COVID outbreaks, and it's reopened this session.
I heard that.
It's open to the public. People can come and sit in the gallery. They can come and sit in on committee hearings. And the committees will be hybrid. They'll be open to the public and have in-person testimony. They will also have online testimony available. So people can do it either way. But to my mind, in-person is always best. It's the most
Absolutely.
effective.
Absolutely.
But both are available, and that's a good thing. We're a big state geographically, and we've got a lot of people on the east side of the state, Spokane way, that have a hard time getting into Olympia. So they can give testimony online, and that's great. And then, but most of the population is on the west side of the mountains, and those people, it's great when they turn out in person and speak to defending their constitutional rights and not tolerating this nonsense from our current governor and state attorney.
Well, I think your point about the delays that we may see, not delays, but the slow process, I think in part what we're seeing in other blue states right now is a bit of a hesitation in light of what we've seen happen in New York, where Governor Hochul went as crazy as Inslee has, and then some last year with a major gun control bill. And that is already being fast-tracked to SCOTUS. We may see an answer possibly yet before session adjourns in your state this coming year, this year right now, on these things. I think a lot of these governors, they don't want to be humiliated again if this thing were to be overturned in court. Maybe that buys us some time. We're going to have to wait and see. I know for our members of Washington Gun Rights, we have a link beneath the video where they can fire off their email. It goes right to their lawmakers in the Capitol. How else can folks be involved in this fight and help you crush this bill if possible?
Well, there's, in addition to the direct contact link, which is very effective, and that's a good one, you can go to the general website for the legislature in Olympia and Washington, which is ledge.wa.gov, G-O-V, ledge.wa.gov. And there you can pull, it's menu driven. You can either type in a number of a bill, if you know it, or you can just type in the name of a committee or scroll down a menu of committees and click through the committee information where you can see schedules. You can see agendas and schedules, and you can check that every week or 2 weeks and see what the next week or 2 weeks has scheduled for hearings on bills. And I'm also pretty active on social media, on Twitter and on Facebook, and I post ahead of time when these controversial bills are coming up for a hearing.
Give your handles or your links right now. What do you got? Where can folks follow you more?
Oh, sure. My website is Representative Jim Walsh, all one long word.com. On Twitter, I'm at Jim Walsh LD19. That's my ledge district. And then on Facebook, you just, if you search Jim Walsh, I'm the first person that comes up.
Yeah, some folks have called you the Rush Limbaugh of the conservative movement, and I take it as a high compliment to yourself. That, I mean, people are getting the word out and sounding the alarm of what's happening. You know, I think throughout history, our country our freedoms have been stewarded by those small number of people who are willing to stand up and get loud when the fight for freedom depended on that. And right now, if we're ever in those days, you're in that time right now in Washington State. So for all the AFA members who are watching right now, for all the Washington gun rights members watching right now, this attack is at your door. It's happening quickly. Get involved in the fight. Follow Representative Walsh on social media. Hit the link below. Make your voice heard. And now's the time. Stand and fight. Thanks a lot for your time, Jim. It means a lot to us.
Well, this is why we're here. This is why we do what we do, Aaron. We've got to fight, as we always do. As we always do. We have to fight to protect our foundational rights. And it's a good fight. And it's a happy fight. So welcome aboard.
Well said. Thanks a lot for your time.